Hey guys, it's LSuperSonicQ here, and today I want to make a video that's a little bit different than the other videos I tend to make, but I figured now that the search is more or less over, it would be fun to reminisce and talk about my experiences searching from beginning to end for A Day with SpongeBob. So anybody who doesn't know, A Day with SpongeBob is like this unauthorized mockumentary bootleg kind of film made by the really shady Regal Films, and it was a really popular Lost Media interest for quite a while, and I was there, like I said, from the very beginning to the very end. My username on like Lost Media Wiki and all that stuff wasn't LSuperSonicQ, but it was Radiant Lloyd Firefly. So if you go back through like forums and comments and stuff on those sites, and you see Radiant Lloyd Firefly, that was me. So I thought it would just be fun talking about my experiences with the search as a whole, because like I said, it's pretty much over now. And looking back, it was such a wild ride that I never expected to get to the point where it did. So I'll try and kind of pick out some highlights and some really fond memories I have. I'm not sure if I could even ever cover the whole start to finish, because there's so much stuff that happened and it's easy to forget things, but for what it's worth, I'll try and make the most of what I remember. So the very first thing was way back when I was first introduced to it. Now that was on the old Lost Media Wiki, which has since been abandoned by pretty much, anybody who wants some type of moderation in a decently run site. So way back on the old wiki, in like March of 2015, so last year, was the first time that I found the A Day with SpongeBob article. And upon first seeing it, I really didn't know what to think about it. I'm like, well, this is peculiar. It's like SpongeBob, but it's not really like SpongeBob because it's like unauthorized and SpongeBob doesn't even appear on the cover anywhere. I thought it was weird, but weird enough to be interesting. And of course there was no information known at the time, and it was one of those things that I wanted to try and like dig deeper into, but we really couldn't. It was me and like a couple other people for the next few months would try and find any info we could, but it was like almost nothing. Though I think the most we found was the stock image of the kid. We found out that was a stock image, that wasn't actually, a character in the movie. That was like the extent of what we found. So it was something that I put on the back burner for a really long time. I pursued other Lost Media things and just other things in general. It was one of those things that, you think about from time to time, like, oh yeah, Day with SpongeBob, let's go hunt for that now. But it's not something that was like at the forefront of like the Lost Media interests or anything like that. So it stayed that way for a few months. Eventually we all migrated over to the new Lost Media Wiki, and the search kind of continued the same way that it did on the old site. We would occasionally pop in and out, talk about, the little things we were finding. For example, we found out that random fan song that was said to be from A Day with SpongeBob. Turns out that was from a fan series completely unrelated to the actual A Day with SpongeBob, and previously we thought that it was related. So, little things like that in the grand scheme of A Day with SpongeBob seems almost irrelevant. But it was progress nonetheless. A lot of the time I was speculating. I was really bad at searching for it at that point, so I was kind of just speculating what I thought and why it was listed on Amazon, but why no one could find it, and if it actually was in stock on Amazon, and what the film could have been like. Was it animated? Was it live action? Little things like that, just to kind of keep it in discussion. But it was pretty relevant on the site for a long time, and I think, continuing to talk about it and bring it, constantly bring it up is what kind of helped make it popular. Because a couple months later, on 4chan, someone just happened to post like the box art, and they're like, hey, has this been found yet? And it was A Day with SpongeBob, and mostly no one knew what that was. And it created such a huge explosion of interest, nonetheless, of something a few months ago that no one except me and a couple other people knew about. So I was so addicted to the 4chan threads and anything that had come out of the 4chan saga, as we call it, because there was information about A Day with SpongeBob that I didn't even know existed at that point. People were finding names of people who worked on the films. They were, discovering all kinds of locations and different things that, like I said, I didn't even know were out there. And looking back, I'm starting to wonder why we didn't really dig deeper into, maybe like the box art itself or the other documentaries Regal made. Maybe we didn't even know that Regal made other documentaries. I don't really remember why we had so much difficulty trying to find information, but for some reason we did it. Here's 4chan, finding everything in within the course of like a week or so. So I was, like I said, obsessed with the 4chan threads. I was on Lost Media Wiki for like almost entire days at a time, talking with people about the newest ADWSS startup news, and giving my own thoughts about what the new leads are going to be. Unfortunately, 4chan kind of died down a little bit in like September or so. Like, it was really big in August, but then September, kind of died down. And that's really when I started to take the forefront of wanting to find this. And kind of ironically, we went back to the old Lost Media Wiki, kind of just because at the time it was a little bit easier to navigate, I will say. And just a lot more people were there. It was just a lot more accessible, if that's the right word. And we really kind of got down to finding, more information about ADWSS SpongeBob. So I would just comment stuff about, whatever along with everyone else. Just trying to pick up the pieces that 4chan left for us and really get to the bottom of this. And I remember the really first big deal kind of thing was Rebel Taxi. Oh my goodness. I remember like when everyone, and this was around the time when everyone had fake DVDs and stuff. There were some leaks on 4chan, fake leaks of people with, animation stills and stuff from the movie. They were all fake. And we had a lot of people on the old Lost Media Wiki, say, oh, look, I have the DVD, and it would just be like a really bad printout of like the cover in a DVD box in front of other DVDs to make it look legit. We knew it was all fake, but then came Rebel Taxi, and he said that he did a video on it or whatever, and he said that he was essentially heavily implying that he had a copy of it, a legit copy of it, and he was going to put it in a video for us to see. He was going to make a video about it. And I remember that day. I was so excited. I could not wait for that video. I had seen other like Rebel Taxi videos before just in passing, but this was like the first time that I'm like, whoa, glad I learned about this guy when I did, because look, he's helping us with the ADWSS SpongeBob search. And I was so excited for that day. I think a lot of other people too, because we thought he actually had a copy and he was teasing a copy. That video came out, dude, I was reading comments. People were like, I don't know how legit this is, it's the internet, but people were like, I skipped school just to see this video because they wanted to see ADWSS SpongeBob so bad. So I remember watching the video, from like start to almost the finish, right before he showed it, and I'm like, this is pretty good video. He has a lot of information. I'm waiting for that reveal. I'm waiting for the reveal. Get to the end of the video. It's not ADWSS SpongeBob. It was some other YouTube, like, parody that I had never seen before, so I didn't recognize it immediately, but I'm like, nah, this can't be it. And, yep, after, looking at more comments and stuff, no, it wasn't it. So Rebel Taxi pretty much trolled us for the most part, and that was a huge letdown. So a little after the Rebel Taxi video was when some pretty big news hit. A couple of, searchers from the old Lost Media Wiki, where we still were at the time, contacted MVD, which is pretty much the distribution company for Regal Films. And they were inquiring about ADWSS SpongeBob and stuff. Long story short, turns out that, according to MVD, they never got any stock for ADWSS SpongeBob, leading them to the conclusion that it was canceled mid-production. However, they claimed that promo copies may have leaked out. So that was a really big kind of blow to the search, because we didn't have much of anything at that point. It was Rebel Taxi faking us out with a video and a bunch of like vague 4chan leads, and that was it. And we had this thing going with MVD, and then they kind of tell us like, sorry, we can't help you, but it wasn't made. And I remember just thinking like, like, we were so close. I thought we had it, and then we didn't, and it was really kind of saddening. But something kind of hit me. They said the movie was canceled pre-production, but how did promo copies slip out if it was canceled? You see the contradiction there? So I was kind of a little like, I don't know if MVD really knows what they're talking about. And regardless, we didn't want to take that as an answer. Sure, maybe it was canceled or whatever. But we wanted to find out why it was canceled, and we wanted to find out if there were promo copies that we could get our hands on. So, talking about huge letdowns, another really big letdown that we had was some jerk. His name was That's Just Low. Now this was a classic, okay? So from like the Rebel Taxi point, like I said, we had a lot of trolls saying they had the movie, they had stuff, and ourselves, the searchers, we were kind of at a loss for information. We couldn't really find anything because it was just one of those times where you're just in a slump, So some guy named That's Just Low happened to pop by the old Lost Media Wiki, and he said to us, "Hey, I work as an asset manager for Nickelodeon, and we dealt with Regal Films, people who made A Day with SpongeBob. The reason why the film was never released and you can't find anything about it is because Regal Films allegedly stole assets from Nickelodeon, like SpongeBob SquarePants assets that they were going to use in A Day with SpongeBob that would have been illegal, would have infringed on copyrights. So essentially the asset manager was saying that they pretty much had to tell Regal to terminate the project or else they'd, forget exactly what he said, if they would have to be sued or if they would pursue legal actions. That's just low. Said that they never pursued legal actions, but we thought that as a whole that made sense because maybe Regal didn't want that kind of attention. They didn't want to get into that, so they just decided not to talk about it. Because we couldn't contact anybody from Regal, and we tried really early on. All the big names, Lorenzo Holley, Jason Boritz, like all the big Regal people, we tried to contact. Nothing. We'd get blocked. We'd get people denying connections, which doesn't really make sense when their name would be in other Regal documentaries. So it was really hard. We couldn't really get in contact with them. So we thought that, okay, well, that's just low, saying that Regal was going to run into legal trouble. Maybe that makes sense. Sure, let's go with it. It seemed legit too. So then he went on to provide us with the vectors that were allegedly stolen. Now, pretty much how this went down is if you contacted That's Just Low on Lost Media Wiki, provided him with your email address, he would email you the vectors. But he said, don't pass these out, don't share them with anybody, nothing like that. Keep them to yourself. So we did that. However, after a while, he did say, well, I found out that someone leaked these, my job is in danger now, so I can't give them out anymore. Now, at this point, okay, we're really kind of worried about this. We're like, whoa, we kind of just screwed, our biggest lead. Someone leaked them, and they were told not to leak them. So we're kind of like, oh, who did this? It was crazy. We're like, oh, we had these, these vectors, we had connections. It was a really big deal. And turns out, kind of long story short, we found out months later he was a fraud. So someone else was part of the search team for quite a while managed to track down his Tumblr, I think it was. And turns out after a little investigation, the dude's in high school, or he's in his early years of college, something like that, because what he was posting about was oh, I can't believe my teacher gave me this much homework and stuff. And we're like, well, wait a second, you have to have certain criteria to be an asset manager at Nickelodeon, which means that he couldn't possibly be an asset manager. Plus, we tracked down the original source of the vectors that he gave to us, which were from various different places, but we tracked those down, so they weren't real vectors that were stolen from the SpongeBob archives or anything. And furthermore, when he said that they were leaked, we never really found out where they were leaked or who leaked them. So it was all kind of these baseless claims and stuff. I had always been suspicious, but I kind of just went along with it because at the time, what are you going to do? You need some kind of lead, and we thought we had one, and turns out we didn't have one. It was kind of like a dead-end goose chase, but I guess looking back, it doesn't really matter because there was a point where we had the vectors, but that was kind of it. We couldn't really do anything else with them. It was just kind of evidence towards theories, but that was kind of all it was. And then, late 2015, I almost thought the search was going to just completely stop because there was such a huge troll. Oh, it was ridiculous on the old wiki. I'm not really sure why it happened. I'm thinking it was because there wasn't a whole lot of information getting passed around, and it was December, the holidays, people really didn't care, whatever. So no one was really talking about A Day with SpongeBob or whatever, and that's when all the trolls just destroyed the page we were on. It was ridiculous. Babylon Josh, he is a classic. He is a classic. The classic troll. He was there, I don't know, back in September trolling us. It was ridiculous. He has 20 fake accounts saying, oh, he has the DVD and blah, 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 and look, it's an Amazon listing and all this really crazy stuff. We couldn't stand it anymore, so we moved to the new wiki. more or less at my discretion, and that was great because we got so much more progress done, and early 2016 we were more or less back in business. So I think starting in like February is really when we really had a solid group of people together. We were on the new Lost Media Wiki forums. We had a Skype group going. It was pretty much more or less the same, group of us talking about what we found and really trying to dig deep to get phone numbers, certain contact info, like really solid things like that. So at that point, the forums were pretty active. I was on there really frequently replying to like every comment that I could. Like if someone said one little thing and like I thought they were like wrong, or they actually said something wrong, or like, whatever, I would be really quick to be like, no, like it's actually this. And it was kind of fun. But we hit maybe the biggest wall a few months later in like March, I think it was. We had like, I don't even know how many numbers it was. We had like maybe 6 Lorenzo Holley numbers and like 2 or 3 Jason Boritz numbers. We called like every single one of them and they were all disconnected. We just could not get through to these guys. It was ridiculous. And I was kind of at like a breaking point because I'm like, this has been going on for too long. We're just chasing numbers and emails and stuff. Now we're not really hunting for the movie anymore. I mean, whether or not that happened naturally or not, is kind of up for debate. But it was just kind of bothering me that we're trying so hard and we didn't really see any results. And then I really flipped out when we called Jason Boritz and we got through to him. Someone, it wasn't me who called, someone on the phone, this is a classic, said, "Hello, is this Jason Boritz?" Asking if we had the right Jason Boritz. Jason flipped out and hung up. And I just could not believe that happened. I flipped out that happened. I'm like, we finally get through to this guy, and he doesn't even give us the chance to talk to him about the movie. That's what I don't understand. We just wanted to know information about the movie. When we were contacting employees on Facebook and Lorenzo Holley's Twitter stuff, we just wanted to know information. We didn't want the movie. I think we actually did offer to buy it at one point. We got ignored from that too. We just wanted to know information and we could not get through. I hit a wall. I went on the forums. I said, guys, this search is over because literally all we're doing now and all we were doing was trying to find phone numbers. And obviously we found a phone number that worked. And it led us nowhere. It got us yelled at, and that was the end of it. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So is there anything else left to do? At that point, it had been like just a few of us going for like the past week or so. And then of course, the second I post that, all of like our really good help started to come back. So it's like, okay. So we kind of had the group together again. I chilled out after like a couple days. I'm like, okay, let's reassess what we're going to do here. And then it was kind of more just number digging. That's all we were really doing and stuff. Trying to find more backstories with Yay Organics and Foy Foods, Lorenzo Holley's other companies and stuff. And there was some exchanging of information going on there as well. It was a good time to be exchanging information because we were getting phone numbers and stuff. It was good. We were making progress even though it wasn't the progress I wanted to be making, but we were making progress. Some more time passed by. We were narrowing down pretty much probably our biggest lead because pretty much one of Lorenzo Holley's companies is Yay Organics. Yay Organics has a booth set up at a farmer's market every like Saturday and Sunday. That farmer's market takes place in the parking lot of some other place. So we were going to go through all those channels just to try and get to contact him. Well, we tried contacting the place where the farmer's market is, and they hung up on us quite rudely, as a lot of people put it, in the Skype group when we first did that. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's not try and contact the place. Let's try and find numbers for the farmers markets. Maybe they'll have contact information because there was no contact information for Yay Organics anywhere. We couldn't find anything. So we're like, maybe we'll contact the farmers market because they must have Yay Organics contact number. We'll get that number then and ask to speak with Lorenzo Holley. So, arguably one of my biggest finds was actually finding the farmers market numbers. There were 2 of them. Yay Organics goes to 2 farmers markets, so I thought we had a good shot at either or. We never even had to call those numbers because relatively soon after I found those numbers, and stuff. There was some lulls with like who was going to call what because after all the stuff that happened before. But we never called those numbers because I wasn't there when the day this happened, because around this time I had been very active in the chat, and like I said, I found the numbers stuff. I'm like, we have a solid lead. I'm spending way too much time in the chat. I think things kind of have to happen naturally, so I'll give it a day or two. The day or two that I skipped was actually the day that they found a random, like, I don't remember exactly what it was, like a random advertisement or some kind of ad that had Lorenzo Holley's number on it, a random number that I guess we hadn't tried before. They tried it, they contacted him, and we have full-length, conversations with Lorenzo Holley about A Day with SpongeBob, and that was pretty much the end of the search, more or less. So I'll link down below the calls and exactly what he said, but for anybody just casually watching this, long story short, he said that A Day with SpongeBob was in production, however it was canceled because he didn't like the quality of it, and that they had plans to put it on Kickstarter or crowdfunding this June actually, and get a re-released version of it, a remastered version. I don't really know what to think about that, considering the movie wouldn't have really costed them anything to make to begin with, because if you've seen Rio's documentaries, they don't require like any effort, and I find it hard to believe that he was going to do this crowdfunding thing before we actively pursued him. Like, if we never contacted him, I bet he probably never would have even said that. That's just me being skeptical, though. I don't know, maybe he was, but I kind of find it hard to believe, knowing the struggles we had to get through just to contact him. But that's kind of it. We called him, we got our answer, and that's kind of it. Kind of case closed. I keep saying kind of for a reason. He did say that promo copies did slip out, which does confirm that MVD was correct in saying that promo copies slipped out. So I'm guessing what happened is like maybe it was like half of the documentary they filmed or something, and they just released half of it, random places. I don't even know where they could have put these promo copies of A Day with SpongeBob. Either that or maybe it was like a trailer or some kind of advertisement on like a DVD. Something slipped out. He said something did get out. There are copies out there for A Day with SpongeBob. So now if you really want to extend the search and say the search continues, if you don't count, when the re-release comes out, I guess, or, this whole crowdfunding thing, I guess finding a copy of the original promo disc would be quite the holy grail, but I have no idea where to even start to look for that, and who knows? That whole thing is like a mystery in itself, so I don't even know what to say about that. But otherwise, yeah, that was pretty much my experience searching for A Day with SpongeBob. It was really fun, quite the journey. Worth it in the end, debatably, because, well, of course, I mean, the search and the hunt was definitely worth it, but I felt like it ended so abruptly. Like, we found a random number, we called Lorenzo Holley, that was it. Crowdfunding in June. It's like, but no, there's so many more questions that we have, so many more questions I have. There were a lot of interesting theories way back in the 4chan days about whether or not Regal Films is like just a front for a money laundering scheme. I feel like there's more to it, and I don't know if we're ever gonna really get to the bottom of that, but I guess that just kind of goes along with the lore of A Day with SpongeBob and kind of, the effect it had on people and stuff. It's funny nowadays. We were trying to post 4chan threads to be like, hey guys, look, like we contacted Lorenzo Holley. Remember this was a big deal back in like August? No one cares anymore. No one cares about A Day with SpongeBob. More like, like the big, like 4chan doesn't really care about it. The Lost Media Wiki themselves was sick of it at a time. You couldn't even mention A Day with SpongeBob without getting like people being like, oh, A Day with SpongeBob, like why are you gonna talk about that here? And it's like, this is the site to talk about that on. I kind of do get where they're coming from though, because like I said, there was that point where I just blew up and I'm like, I can't do this anymore, I'm done with it. So I get what they're saying, but I mean, we have new information. I don't know. But anyway, that was my A Day with SpongeBob story firsthand from, well, Radiant Lloyd Firefly, because that's what I was on Lost Media Wiki, but I'm LSuperSonicQ, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any other interesting questions or anything about the search, either comment that down below or check out the Lost Media Wiki threads and the comments I left on there, or check out the Lorenzo Holley call below, or anything else that we've made in conjunction with A Day with SpongeBob. So, thanks for watching as always. I'm LSuperSonicQ, and until the next video, Finn.